are you listening to? Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn. Things are heating up in the elections. Well, I don't know that they've ever cooled down. Right? And as we go through the primaries and into the fall, they will continue. But there are a lot of issues that are front and center for everybody in addition to elections.
It's crazy headlines week too. I mean, like for the last week, there have just been some crazy headlines that we're gonna.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed some headlines are the same day after day after day from certain papers. It's like they're trying to drill something into our heads that may or may not be what they want it to be. But anyway, we have a guest tonight, Cari Bartholomew, who has some experiences that I think can help inform the discussion around a lot of issues that are going on in the state right now. And, you know, Kim and I have talked a lot. As I bring you in, Cari, I want to make this point. Kim and I have talked a lot over the years about I find it kind of funny and amusing that some people will choose to be the voice of women and present themselves as the voice of women as though all women think the same way, have had the same experiences, and are the same politically, which I think is a little bit insulting. And Cari has had some of these same experiences, I think she would say, with regard to, I don't know, womanhood, I don't know, but race, certainly. And so, Cari, we are so thrilled to have you on our show tonight. We'd love for you to tell us a little bit, just starting off, about your background and what has brought you into the political scene in Utah. Why do many of us know who you are?
But yes, I moved here from Washington State a year ago to get away from all of the woke that was happening. My biracial son, second generation, I'm biracial, so he's a quarter, was told to identify as his oppressed side and reject his oppressive side. And that was something I'm not about to have, because I've worked hard to make sure that my son does not live a life of oppression, which is something I know quite a bit about. And so we came here thinking that we'd find safety, and we're finding that it seems like it's in competition with Washington State.
Well, you know, and it's been said, some people have stressed that if certain things about America fail, there's no place else to go. And I think in America, there's Utah. And if it doesn't work in Utah, there's nowhere else to go. I mean, like, really, Texas, Florida, and Utah are the hope of a nation, which a nation that is the hope for the world. And so I imagine that had to be crushing to get on your life raft and come to Utah and find more of the same thing.
Yeah, it was. We purchased a home. We uprooted everything that we had. We'd taken a job that pays a lot less, just so that we could be in a safe, conservative area. And then we have a governor who announces his pronouns. And we have SEL with a transformative lens in our schools, which is literally teaching our kids to be part of collectives. All of the things that, and I mean, we're literally everything. It's been extremely disheartening to come here, and also to see that the perceived racism that is absolutely everywhere in all of the constant narrative is both on the left and the right when it comes to Black voices.
So you are a member of Blexit. You're on the governing board of Blexit. Tell us about that organization, what your mission is.
Sure. Blexit is Candace Owens's organization. And we are supposed to be politically neutral, but the truth is that it's Black people leaving the Democratic Party. And because it seems like the Democratic Party has had a hold on the Black community. They've said that we are for Black people. What has happened, though, since 2020, a lot of people have started to wake up and going, what exactly are you for us? What exactly have you improved in our lives? They started going down the rabbit hole when they felt like they were lied to in some things in 2020. And as they go through the rabbit hole, they realize that actually being taught that you're a victim is primarily an education situation, and that education, the people who have the power over education tend to be the Democratic Party.
Yeah, that's true. We've seen that. We've seen that nationwide. We've seen that in our state, right? So tell me, so you've been in Utah about a year, and what have you seen? Look, I don't want to make this assumption like, oh, all women hang out, all Mormons hang out, all Black people know each other, right? But with your involvement in Blexit, what have you seen? Have you seen a lot of movement, like into kind of a state of awakening for a lot of these people who are involved in the Blexit movement? Are they newer, or are they people who kind of the same people who've been there over time?
No, so I'm a little different in that I've been a conservative almost my entire life. When I was 18, I was aging out of foster care, and a teacher told me that I asked her, I respected her, and I said, what party should I join? I don't know anything about politics, and I want to figure this out. And she said, oh, that's easy. You're Black and you're poor. You're a Democrat. And I thought, yeah, I don't want to be poor forever. So I guess I'm not going to be a Democrat. And so that's where my journey down, and it didn't align with my own personal values, which I think a lot of African Americans, if they're honest, their values lean more towards the conservative. They're more fiscally conservative. They still believe in religion and being in church. So they've just believed a lie. So what Blexit is doing, because this is, I think there's only a third of the population here is African American. And the majority of that is woke. We're working on recruiting people, and we're finding it's those people that have dissent at all, because this new movement, the woke movement, is basically a religion, and it is Marxism. And those totalitarian movements cannot tolerate any dissent. So when a Black person goes, well, I agree with that and I agree with that, but I don't agree with that, they find themselves getting kicked out. And so what I was saying about the racism on both sides, I'm a delegate, and I was at state, and I'd reached out to a woman. I saw a Black woman, and so I made a beeline. I'm like, hey, I'm a recruiter for Blexit. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian and I've been a conservative for 35 years. And I said, oh, they want CRT in our schools. And she said, I agree with that. And I was like, you what? And I kind of was like, oh, and I could feel myself kind of withdrawing. And then she said, well, first a person walked by her and barely touched her. And she was like, did you see him push me? So I can always tell when there's like just a bitterness, and I don't like it. It's not who I am. And I am just like, can you give people the benefit of the doubt until they prove you wrong? Right. And so I'm talking to this lady, and I said, do you know that in Salt Lake, they have PTA meetings based on your race? So Hispanic people go at one time, Caucasian people go at one time, and Black people go at another. And she goes, see, I agree with that. And I said, oh, you what? And she said, well, who else can help our people but ourselves? And I was recently on PBS and talking to two neutral people and with another conservative, actually the former head of, I don't know if he's the head of caucus. I'm not really, all of the political things kind of get me confused. But James Evans. And he had said, we're all a collective. We all go into collective categories. And I just thought, I'm not interested in being part of a collective. So I'm not LDS, but we're former LDS. I don't identify, like, I honestly call myself biracial, not African American. And to me, it's no different than, yes, there's truth to the fact that when you go places, the first thing people see is the color of your skin. But it's not really, in my opinion, any different than if the first thing that you see is whether or not a person's attractive or not. Right. Or if a person is, smells, or not that that's what Black is, but I'm just saying that everybody has character, whatever. Right. So it's not a big deal to me. And I am having a teenager and seeing the world that he's growing up to. I just today heard about a school that made all the white boys stand up in class and say that they were white and had privilege. And I'm thinking about my son, who is pale with freckles and red hair.
Yeah.
And are they going to make him do that?
Is
Because
this a Utah school?
it is. Yes.
Wow. When is this stuff going to stop?
Yeah.
I mean,
I really believe that we're headed for a train wreck of gigantic proportions. So we just got an ethnic studies commission.
Yeah.
And I was on a call with this board, and I felt like the kind of bitterness was palpable in the call. And I asked them, I said, here's my concerns, because there were some people who wanted me to be on the subcommittee. And I said, here's my concerns. I don't want to teach anyone that they're a victim, because it's not helpful for anyone. And I don't want to teach anyone else that they're victimizers, because they're going to resent that. And it's not necessarily the truth. You are assuming that every Black person is poor and every white person has privilege. And I know, like, one of my closest friends lives in Tennessee and is like from a poor coal mining town. And she's a white woman. And she's a single mom raising her son. And I have a lot more privilege in my life than she does.
Right.
And this idea, the other thing that really bothers me is called post-traumatic slave syndrome, where people believe that because of the oppression, intergenerational trauma of years and years, that they cannot achieve today because of it. And when you listen to a lot of these people talk, they'll say, well, my father or my grandfather went through this. And I'm like, how I look at this is, but you didn't have to.
Right.
Because somebody else paved the way.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I was visiting with my parents yesterday, and it was interesting because they brought up the fact that for both of them, in their grandparents' generation, in our family, there was a lot of alcoholism, right? And they talked about how generationally there were these changes, and you had, by the time you got to that generation, their grandchildren, they were all college educated, except for one, right? All college educated. Their great grandchildren have as well all been college educated, many very impressive degrees and careers. And this thinking that where you come from is where you will be forevermore is so damaging to a person. I want to give you one more, I want to finish that off with one more thing and then make one other comment. And that is, we've seen historically that those things do not have to hold us back in the United States of America unless we focus so much on them that we destroy what we could be, right? We destroy something within ourselves. And I'll tell you, so my father I grew up in New York, and in New York, there was a woman he worked with from India, and he was a PhD scientist, had another woman who was a woman who was highly educated from India, and very successful in her work, but came from one of the lowest classes in India. And he said it was the saddest thing. He saw her as she dealt with the internal struggles from success that she didn't think that she was worthy of having. And he said she ended up leaving the United States and going back to India because that was more than she could deal with. She inside felt like she could not be that person, and she was more comfortable being somebody who could not accomplish things because that had been beaten into her entire life growing up. And that is what she'd been told by everybody around her, that the success was something she just couldn't even handle emotionally in her life. That's what's going to happen to these kids.
Yeah, and not just the Black children. That's the thing about SEL. Social and emotional learning with a transformative lens is about teaching all of our kids to adopt critical theory. And that is not critical thinking. That's what people need to understand. Right. It's literally looking at African Americans and how did we succeed in keeping them crippled? How did we succeed in teaching them that they can't lead themselves? So now let's do that to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of teaching them that they are individuals and they have gifts that they can emulate, that they can build on, right? That are special to them, that they need to develop.
Well, we have so much conflict on the messaging to our kids because right now, and we're getting about the 2-minute signal here, that this is Resiliency Month.
Yes.
For children. And so we have, the governor proclaiming this is Resiliency Month, that you are resilient and you have the tools to overcome everything. And the other side of that is no, you don't, because you were roadblocked to start with before you were even born. And what a conflict to students and those mixed messages. And
well, it's also manufactured. So it's manufactured to tell people. We had a state rep stop by our house to ask for a vote, and he said, parents are only concerned about 3 things. Can their kids read? Can they do math? And are they going to kill themselves? That's a lie.
Yeah.
Most kids are not thinking about killing themselves. Are there some? Yes. But when you take kids in and make them identify their privilege or their oppression, when you make them read books that are just depressing about cops killing thousands of people, which doesn't happen, when you take them and take all of the joy out of their life and point your finger and turn them into social justice warriors in school, that's where the mental health crisis comes from.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a crisis in mental health, and the more the schools get involved, the worse that problem becomes. And, Kim, to your point about the conflicting messages, when children, adults struggle with this, but when children are given conflicting messages and they don't know who they are and they think they're bad, but then they're being told to buck up and survive it, and there's something worth living for, you think that we are not totally messing them up emotionally in a way that makes them say, I just need this to end? Yeah. It is damaging. So I would say we need to continue this conversation another time because this can go into so many different areas of life. Right now, we're dealing with this to a great degree culturally and socially through our politics, through the schools, with the children. But these ideas, these destructive ideas, really are permeating everything in society right now.
well, that's if you believe that's actually happening and that,
Oh, yeah, it's not happening. I forgot.
Or if you do talk about it, you might be called by Steve Handy, white supremacists or something. As a yeah.
Oh, awesome.
While being on a black show.
While being on a black show.
Yes.
World is upside down.
Yes, it is. Well,
upside
thank
down.
you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you tonight. Do you have social media that people can follow, a website, anything where you are interacting on these ideas with members of the public?
Yeah. I have a small YouTube channel. It's called Martin's Daughter. I talk about SEL. I do interviews with people, and I talk about race and truth. My motto is kind of live not by lies. So you can find me at Martin's Daughter on YouTube.
Nice.
Great. All right. Everybody should go there and check it out. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
So, Carolyn, this has been like the week of stuff that got out and ahead of things that probably shouldn't have gotten out ahead of things.
That is true.
With the SCOTUS ruling, we're going to talk about that.
Attorneys in courts.
Yeah.
So
something happened this week. We have new legislation that deals with the existence of pornography in schools.
Yeah, which is all over the place, apparently.
Another fake.
I had no idea.
Another fake news thing, right? Because it doesn't really.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, someone posted some pages today, and I unfortunately
don't read that stuff.
had the privilege.
Stuff.
I got about 2 sentences in and went, "What the hell?" And I don't swear.
Oh,
so.
Carolyn said the H word. Fosmood, that's going in bloopers because that never happens. And as much as I'm trying to lead her into the world of at least a handful of of cuss words, but no. So, okay, so we did have this addressed in the session, and it was not without its controversy in the session.
Right.
And it did sort of prompt some readings in committee meetings, in school board meetings, in media, and holy cow, this stuff does exist. And so we have Representative Ken Ivory, who ran the legislation, because why can Representative Ivory, what were you finding on bookshelves in schools?
In Utah.
Yeah, well,
In
I didn't
Utah?
find- yeah, I didn't find anything myself. I had a bunch of moms and dads come to me, and they started showing me what they're finding and what their kids were bringing home from Utah schools. And I mean, it was just flat out alarming. I mean, I've learned in this discussion that please, everyone that's listening or watching, reserve judgment until you've actually gone and looked at some of the materials. You can go to stoputahporn.com. You can go to Laverna in the Library Facebook page. And you have to, like Carolyn was saying, you have to look and see. Not that I want to distribute or promote pornography, but you really cannot believe what is in schools that a lot of these librarians and school officials are apologizing for, that they're making excuses for these things being in the library, and they're trying to talk First Amendment and those sorts of things. There is just vile and vulgar material. I mean, bestiality, incest, graphic descriptions of rape, graphic descriptions of sodomy. I mean, graphic descriptions of necrophilia, sex with dead people illustrated. I mean, I hate to even say these things to describe what it is, but honestly, if you haven't seen what is in schools, you could blow it off as, oh, those are parents that want to burn books and they're prudish and they have these prudish sensibilities. No, if you think that at all, go look at some of the materials. Laverna in the Library Facebook page, stoputahporn.com. And once you've looked at that, then come back and then let's talk about, do we have a problem that we need to get things out? Well, the entire legislature looked at that. Republicans and Democrats in both houses said, oh my gosh, we've got to get this stuff out of schools. So that's a little bit of the background of it. But the parents came, bless the parents. Parents had had enough. They had been blown off. They went to school districts and they were treated very condescendingly. Oh, pat them on the head and sit down and be quiet. And you can't read the material that's in schools, because if you read that in a school board meeting, that would be offensive and improper.
Or if you read it in the break room at work, it could be sexual harassment.
Yeah, I think you'd lose your job over that.
And so we're trying to protect our children from the reaches of internet and things like that, and keeping those things out of their lives, and yet the school is making it readily available. So let's talk about the process in this. You passed the bill, signed into law. So then what happens?
And if I'm gonna, let's talk about the standard of the bill just a second, because this is important. The standard of the bill on what is described and defined as pornographic and indecent material is the same standard that already exists in Utah law that prohibits students from the types of material they can access on their devices or bring to school. So the law that already criminalizes something that a student would bring to school, we use that exact same standard for the material the schools provide. So it's important to know that. That's the standard that we used.
But if a librarian supplies it, it should be okay.
Well, so let's get into that. So this is what happens when a bill is passed. In order for an agency, the executive branch, to execute those laws, there's usually a rulemaking process, and they study that law. And so this week, and you brought this to our attention, to Carolyn and my attention early, that the Attorney General that is assigned to the State Board of Education released a memo that, then what happened?
Well, yeah, the bill actually called for guidance and training involving the Attorney General. The State Board of Education asked for that to be in the bill, and so we put that in the bill. This Assistant Attorney General released a memo that was just way off the mark. I mean, it even cited completely the wrong section of code. So in the bill, the standard that we were just talking about is 7610-1235. And it's in the criminal code. That's pornographic, indecent material that students can't access at school. We adopt that standard in HB 374, the bill that I passed. 7610-1235 has three different standards in it. It's 7610-1201, 1203, and 1227. 1227 is really the key, because 1227 says three specific types of pornographic, indecent conduct are not have no serious value to minors. And Kim, you'll understand from education law when they say, does it have serious artistic, literary, or scientific value, and does it have serious value to minors? Well, in Utah code, we already said that three specific things. And again, I hate to even recite what they are, but it's graphic sexual conduct involving exposure of the pubic region, as defined in the bill, right? So it talks about graphic types of sexual conduct, and it says right in 7610-1227, A, B, or 1, 2, and 3, these have no serious value to minors. So you don't do the weighing test, you don't do the prurient interest and in the community and serious artistic literary value. You don't do that. Well, the Attorney General that wrote the memo missed all of that because she cited the wrong section of code. She cited 1217, not 1227. And so then by citing the wrong section of code, she comes back and says, well, this bill is a big nothing burger. It doesn't change the standard at all. And puts out this memo and sends it to all the schools throughout the state. Well, she's got entirely the wrong section of code. So I've been in some conversations with some of the staff in the Attorney General's office. They're revisiting the memo, and hopefully they're going to come back and look at the actual standards that are in HB 374 and get the standards right, and where we've actually spelled out that certain conduct is just out unless it's in. And that's a really key point, because some people have brought up, oh, well, if we follow that standard, then the Bible and Shakespeare are going to be out, because, we have an epidemic in Utah of students studying the Bible and Shakespeare. In
I've
schools,
noticed.
right?
I've noticed. Yeah.
And so, but in the bill, it says there are certain things that, even though they may technically fit the definition of pornographic or indecent, they're excluded from being prohibited. So, medical texts, some of the health-related text. And then it says anything else that the state board affirmatively reviews and by rule exempts. So if there's anything else that they think, they make the slippery slope argument and say, oh my gosh, this great literature is going to be out. Well, that's fine. Then go to the state board, make your case as to why it really should be in. That's available. But what we're doing is we're changing the standard of everything comes in and it's a fight to get anything out.
Yeah.
We're saying, no, the most graphic sexual conduct is out unless you make the case that it should be in.
Some of these things, it just seems and I get you're a lawyer and having been a lawmaker, I understand you have to have standards that are expressed in law, but some of these things are just self-evident. They're just self-evident, and it's crazy that I know there have been meetings where education leaders have really fought about whether this is the book burning, it's the modern book burning, and these things are just self-evident. And like you started, Ken, saying that the things that some of our education leaders are defending, promoting, and trying to assign some virtue to some of this material is just crazy. Where is just plain old common sense?
That's right.
And self-evident truth?
Yeah, I mean, that's really sad. So some of the arguments that came out was if we prohibit some of the materials that the parents have found, that it would be racist because there are African American authors or Asian authors or Latino authors. And so we went into the minority caucus. We had some African American folks who had read some of the books and Latino folks who had read some of the books. And they went into the minority caucus and said, hey, wait a minute. I don't want my children, my grandchildren being anywhere near this material. And to think that there are not African American authors who write virtuous and uplifting and gratifying material versus this spiritual sewage that we're allowing to be dumped into the souls of our children. And they were just offended. And sadly, they kind of got shouted down in the minority caucus meeting. It was really kind of a sad display.
And let's be clear to members of the public that for members of the public, minority caucus means the Democrats.
Not the majority party. Yeah,
not the majority party.
Minority
not
party, political
minority
party.
As in racial minority. Right. Just to explain that to people.
But so there are some people that are just so, I don't even really know what the word is. They're just so locked into this material has to be in schools. It's hard to imagine. I mean, give you an example, right? And I hate to even mention this, but one of the books that was the one that I think appalls me the most, and there are many, but the book is called My Friend Dahmer, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh, wow.
And the book is illustrated. So it's not just written depictions, it's illustrated about a young person fantasizing about having sex with dead people.
Yeah, that's
so you
lovely.
say, where's the common sense? I would say, where's the outrage in school officials and librarians? The parents are outraged.
Yeah.
And they've been very condescendingly pushed aside. And fortunately, the representatives and others are stepping up and saying, no, we're going to represent the people on this, and we're not just going to sit down and take a pass. This is not right. You know, in 2016, Senator Weiler brought forward a resolution, and the legislature and the governor declared pornography a public health crisis in Utah. I mean, this is the gateway to child sex trafficking. This is the gateway to some of the worst conduct that happens in our society, the pornography. We declared it a public health crisis, and in 2018 and 19, the education establishment was putting out how to stop pornography, but apparently somebody lost the memo between then and now.
So do you think, based on your conversations, and maybe you're unable to say at this point, that there will be an update to that guidance from the AG's office?
Well, yes, I'm confident there's going to be an update. I mean, at a minimum, they cited the wrong section of code.
Yeah. Okay.
So they cited 1217 instead of 1227, and that's not a little difference. 1227 is really the code section that makes the difference. It changes that balance, and instead of everything being in unless it's out, it's these specific graphic sexual conduct, they're out unless they make a case for it to come in. Let me just, if I can, just describe a really amusing aspect of the case so people can be alerted to what's been going on. So about 40 years ago, there was a Supreme Court case called Island Trees School District versus Pico. The case was about a summary judgment was granted at the lower court, and it went to the Supreme Court on whether or not a motion for summary judgment was appropriate, basically deciding the case before it goes to trial. 3 judges were joined by 2 other judges to say summary judgment wasn't appropriate. There were issues of fact in dispute, and so summary judgment wasn't appropriate. That was the holding of the case. On top of that, 3 judges out of 9 said, oh, and by the way, we think libraries are really special and the materials are different. And we think that students have a right to receive books that are out in the universe. 3 judges said, in addition to the holding of the case, we think this. Well, the ACLU and the American Library Association and others took that suggestion, what they call it dicta in the legal world, of those 3 judges and started pushing that into policy. And so basically where we stand now is they say that, yeah, for practical reasons, you certainly can't put every book in the universe on the bookshelves just because you don't have the storage space. You have to discriminate somewhere. So you can discriminate in making selections as to what goes on a school shelf. But if it ever makes it on the shelf somehow, it's like pulling teeth to get it out. If it's political or religious, you can't get it out. Now, even the 3 judges said if it's vulgar and pornographic, well, of course you can get it out. Well, they ignore that part of the 3 judges, and they call it political to get pornographic material out. So the game now is, sadly, they bundle books, and they have like awards that are assigned to these books, and they put them in bundles. And so they buy a bundle of books.
Gotcha.
And there's 5 or 6 bad apples in a bundle of books. And so they're taking some materials off the shelf, and it's on the shelf now. You can't, the way we interpret what those 3 judges said 40 years ago, you can't get it out. And most of the education administrators have said, oh my gosh, I guess we can't get it out. We might get sued.
Go ahead. It seems to me as though I think I talk about this a lot, like defining terms, defining our end game. Those are both things that the left struggles with, I think. And here we have, because the definitions and the vision would be something that would be widely rejected if they ever had to define those things. I think we need to go back to defining the purpose of education. Right? That is lost in all of these discussions where we're focused on these little issues that aren't little, they're massive, but because as conservatives, we believe that education has a higher purpose than what it's serving right now. And I think we need to ask the education community to define their purpose in education, and then we all get to vote on whether that's what we want or not.
Okay, but even
and redirect.
But even so, I mean,
and then Fosma wants to say something.
I'm trying to think of a definition on the fly here that libraries wouldn't be consistent with in supplying books and literature and resources, whether that's a very small and limited view of what the education system is supposed to do, or whether it's really super broad. When I think of this, I think of how we've discussed on the podcast the corruption of so many of our institutions, and education being one. But libraries, I mean, libraries is an institution that there's a fondness in that, and we all remember being a kid and going to the library and looking for the next book in a series you love, or finding a corner to sit and just open a book. And for a lot of us, our generation and maybe older, we like the feel of books in our hands, and we like the feel of paper and flipping these pages and doing what books do, and taking you to places and giving you information and insight and experiences and all this.
Uplifting us while it does that, right?
Or sometimes even telling some of the hard truths of life too.
Okay.
And challenging, or those examples of life's challenge and triumph and these things. Like, I think there's even a place for things that aren't necessarily uplifting, but don't go do damage to our children.
Well, that's
and so
right.
This is another institution that we can't trust anymore. Libraries. And that's our school libraries. I don't know if we need to talk about the county libraries.
Yeah, I've been done with them for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, let me give you an example on that. So we went and met with the Davis School District last week and met with them on this because a number of parents were concerned about what was there. We met with their curriculum person and their library person, and they were so dismissive. I mean, they were just dismissive. And well, we think federal law trumps state law, and yeah, they just shut things down, But we had a clinical psychologist.
Did somebody really tell Ken Ivory that federal law trumps state law? That was the wrong person to say that to.
I asked him for chapter and verse, and of course I said, which judges in the Pico case are you following? Because there were 3 that went this way and 2 that went. They couldn't answer that, of course. But we had a child clinical psychologist there, and he said, I've looked at these materials. I've had the people I associate with look at these materials. These are harmful. They're clearly pornographic. They are triggering and harmful to children. And if you'd like, I'll send you a link to a YouTube video of someone right here, high school in Eagle Mountain. His son is dealing with addiction issues, sex addiction issues. And he's gone through every book in the library, found every book that's there, and exhausted every book that is graphic, pornographic sexual material to feed the addiction that the parents are just working desperately to try to help their child through this. And our schools are giving them the ammunition. When you say do no harm, and so if people say, oh, we might sweep in some Shakespeare, well, first do no harm. Don't leave books on the shelf. And then if we need to bring it in, let's bring it in. But there's some harm happening right then. And even though the child clinical psychologist came in and made that opinion, they didn't care. They said, no, we're leaving the books on the shelf.
Wow.
These are people that our kids spend most of their waking day with.
Yeah.
Wow.
They're missing the big point.
Well, that's horrifying.
Well, guys, on another time, I did open a bill file on the Westminster situation as well. So Westminster announced a hardcore porn class at Westminster College, and so what the
For
bill
all
will
future teachers. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, right. So they're going to get together and watch hardcore pornography together and talk about it. I'm working with the college Republicans. They brought it up, and so we've got a bill file that basically says, if you're going to act like an adult bookstore, like a sexually oriented business, we're going to regulate you like a sexually oriented business. You can have it both ways.
Nice.
Awesome.
Well, that was another just proud moment for Utah when that came out. That, one of our schools.
Yeah. At least
has
it's not a state institution. I mean, at least thank goodness for small blessings.
But Utah leads in so many ways. So let's just add that to it. Well, thank you, Representative.
Again, guys, just anyone watching, if you have questions and you think this is a bunch of prudes that want to play church lady, please go look at the materials. If we can get rid of Dr. Zeus, we ought to be a little circumspect on the types of graphic X-rated things that are in our schools. StopUtahPorn.com and Laverna in the library. Just if you have any questions, if this is too far over the top, go look at the kinds of materials these parents have brought forward. And the entire legislature, Republicans and Democrats, decided that, no, this has to stop.
Yeah, you couldn't even read it. You could not even read it in some committee meetings. No. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, Representative Ivory. And follow. People need to follow that.
Yes, they do.
See what's out there, and don't just assume that this is over the top. So
we've done a lot of assuming for a lot of years. I think we're all done with that. Hopefully.
Absolutely.
So go ahead. You're closing.
Well, I was just going to say, thank you again for joining Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn. And I'm Kim, by the way. Kim.
And I'm Carolyn.
And Carolyn has that little bit deeper radio voice.
I got to tell you, it sounded really good during COVID.
Carolyn. So that's Carolyn. And I'm the one that if I get excited, my voice goes this high pitched, which, triggers the mom nag response in the brain. But anyway, thank you again for joining us. Please give us a follow and a share, and let your friends know about us, and wherever you find your favorite podcast. So we're everywhere now.
Yeah.
Everywhere,
we are everywhere. Hope to see you next time. Again.